The wind swept softly through the emerald valleys, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and distant rain. Suinīng stood at the edge of the village, her slender fingers brushing against the coarse fabric of her shawl. She gazed beyond the distant hills where the sun dipped low, casting shadows over the swaying rice fields. Her heart, restless and heavy, thudded against her ribs. Each day felt the same, measured footsteps, whispered duties, and the weight of expectation pressed down on her young shoulders. Yet, something inside her stirred for more, something unspoken, wild, and yearning. It was during the festival of the harvest moon when their paths first crossed. The village thrummed with life that night, drums echoing against the mountain's edge, laughter spilling from every doorway. Suinīng walked among the crowd, her dark eyes bright beneath the lantern light. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to forget the constraints of custom. The air was thick with the aroma of roasted maize and sweet millet wine, but none of it touched her senses as much as the stranger's gaze that found her from across the square. Rangvom stood near the fire pit, his posture easy but alert. His tall frame cast a shadow against the light, and there was something in his presence, something unruly. His hands were rough from labor, his skin bronzed by the sun, but it was his eyes that held her, deep, steady, and searching. He was not from her village. That much was clear. The cut of his tunic and the crimson thread tied around his wrist marked him as an outsider. Strangers did not linger long in their village. They came to trade, to pass through. Yet, Rangvom seemed rooted to the earth beneath his feet, as if nothing could pull him away. Their eyes met, a spark igniting between them, swift, bright, and dangerous. Suinīng looked away, but the warmth crawling up her neck betrayed her composure. Something in her chest tightened. No one had ever looked at her that way, not with curiosity, not with understanding. She should have stepped back into the safety of familiar voices, but her feet refused to move. When he began to walk toward her, the sound of the festival faded into a distant hum. "Do you always stand apart from the crowd?" His voice was low but clear, with a softness that surprised her. Suinīng lifted her chin, masking her unease with cool defiance. "I prefer quiet to noise," she said. A smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Then we are alike." His tone was warm, as if he already knew her heart. "I'm Rangvom. My people live beyond the southern hills." "You shouldn't be here," she said, but the words lacked conviction. "And yet here I am." His gaze lingered on her face, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed smaller, just the two of them beneath the stars. Their meeting should have ended with that exchange. But something, whether fate or folly, pulled them back together. In the days that followed, Suinīng found herself drawn to the edge of the forest where Rangvom often came to gather herbs. Their conversations were careful at first. Glances stretched into words. Words grew into laughter. Each meeting dissolved the distance between them. She learned that he was the youngest son of a hunter, that his mother wove cloth finer than silk, and that he dreamed of a life beyond the rigid traditions of his people. In turn, Suinīng revealed pieces of herself no one else had cared to see. She spoke of the river where she sought solitude, the stories her grandmother told of spirits who punished those who disobeyed, and the quiet ache in her chest when she imagined a life bound by duty. With Rangvom, she did not need to measure her words or hide her thoughts. In the shelter of the forest, their bond deepened, wild and unyielding like vines reaching for sunlight. But the world beyond their sanctuary was not kind to secrets. The village had long memories and sharper tongues. Rumors began as whispers, glimpses of Suinīng walking the wooded paths, of Rangvom's lingering presence. Elders murmured disapproval, their faces creased with the weight of tradition. A girl like Suinīng had a place, to marry within the village, to serve her family, to uphold honor. An outsider had no claim on her heart. One evening, as dusk clung to the sky, Rangvom's hand found hers beneath the sheltering canopy of an ancient oak. His fingers were warm, rough against her skin, and when he spoke, his voice trembled with urgency. "Come with me," he said. "Beyond these mountains, no one will bind us. We could be free." Her heart leaped at the thought, yet fear tangled with her longing. She knew the price of defiance. Girls who disobeyed were cast out, their names forgotten. The love she felt for Rangvom burned bright. But was it enough to escape the weight of her world? "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice no louder than the rustling leaves. He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away the tear she did not realize had fallen. "I would never let harm come to you," he vowed. "But I cannot stay here hidden in shadows. I will fight for you, Suinīng, if you let me." A part of her wanted to believe that love alone could conquer the forces pressing against them. But the world was not made for such softness. She had seen how swiftly joy could turn to sorrow, how easily the will of the few could break the hearts of the brave. Still, when he bent his head and their lips met, all the fears melted away. In that stolen kiss, she tasted freedom, a life where love was not a crime. But freedom came with a cost. The rumors grew louder. Her father's face grew hard with suspicion, her mother's silence heavy with disappointment. One morning, as Suinīng gathered water from the well, the village's eldest woman called to her, her voice sharp as the winter wind. "You tread dangerous paths, child," she warned. "Love outside your place brings nothing but ruin." Suinīng lowered her gaze, but defiance burned in her chest. How could something that felt so pure be wrong? She would not let them take this from her, not without a fight. Yet, even as the sun dipped behind the mountains and she returned to the woods to find Rangvom waiting, a shadow lingered on the edges of her joy. The world was watching, and the world was not kind. The air grew colder as the days passed, as though the earth itself sensed the weight pressing down on Suinīng's heart. The once playful glances and secret meetings had become heavy with the knowledge that time was no longer their ally. The village no longer whispered, it watched. Wherever Suinīng walked, eyes followed, heavy with suspicion. Rangvom's presence, once an unnoticed shadow along the edge of the forest, became a wound in the village's pride, a challenge to the laws no one dared break. Her father's silence turned to sharp words. Her mother's gentle hands became heavy with fear. Each evening, the tension in their home swelled until it felt like the walls themselves strained to hold their anger. When her father finally spoke of it, his voice was like stone scraping against stone. "You will not see him again," he said, the finality of his words striking like a blow. "Do you understand what you are risking? Our blood, our honor. You would cast it away for an outsider." Suinīng swallowed the ache rising in her throat. She wanted to tell him that love could not be measured by bloodlines or weighed by the laws of the elders. But she knew words would never bend his heart. "I love him," she said quietly, though every muscle in her body trembled. The slap came swift and sharp, a flash of pain blooming across her cheek. But it was her father's eyes, filled not with anger, but with fear, that cut deeper. In his world, love had no power against the laws of the village. To defy those laws was to invite ruin. That night, when the moon hung heavy and full over the valley, Suinīng slipped from her home and made her way to the place where Rangvom waited. She found him leaning against an old cedar tree, his face shadowed in the pale light. He rose when he saw her, his expression softening even as worry flickered beneath the surface. Without a word, she pressed herself against him, breathing in the familiar warmth of his skin. "They know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They will never let us be together." Rangvom's arms tightened around her. For a long moment, the world felt quiet, just his heartbeat beneath her ear, steady and sure. "Then let's leave," he said, his breath warm against her hair. "We have nothing to keep us here. If we go beyond the mountains, no one will control us." Her heart pounded at his words, torn between longing and fear. She wanted to say yes, to run with him to a place where the world could not touch them. But she knew what it meant to abandon the village, to turn her back on everything she had ever known. If they left, there would be no return. Still, as the wind swept through the forest, she could not bring herself to let him go. "When?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Tomorrow," he said, his fingers brushing softly against her face. Meet me at dawn by the river." For the first time in weeks, hope stirred within her, a fragile thing, but alive. She clung to it as she returned home beneath the cloak of night, her footsteps light and swift. But hope was not enough to outrun the eyes that watched. By morning, the elders knew. Someone, whether out of fear or spite, had spoken of Suining's nightly disappearances. As the first light crept across the village, her father's voice cracked through the stillness. She did not resist as he dragged her to the council square, her arms bruised beneath his grip. The elders stood in a circle, their faces etched with lines as deep and unforgiving as the laws they upheld. "You have shamed us," her father spat, his fury trembling beneath the weight of humiliation. "You would leave us for a stranger, a man with no place among us." Suinīng lifted her chin, though her heart thundered in her chest. "I love him," she said again, and this time she did not flinch. The eldest among them stepped forward, his voice slow and heavy with authority. "Love," he said, as if the word itself was a curse. "Do you know the price of defiance, child? Our laws are not made to be broken. If you leave, you may never return. If you stay, the boy must be cast out, or worse." Fear coiled around her ribs like a serpent, but she did not yield. "We will not be separated," she said, "no matter the cost." A murmur swept through the crowd, some voices thick with anger, others with disbelief. In the silence that followed, the elder's face grew hard as stone. "Then you will face judgment," he said. By the time Suinīng was led back to her home, the sky had darkened with the threat of rain. She had not seen Rangvom since the morning, but she knew the elders would find him. And when they did, there would be no mercy. When night fell, she slipped away once more. Her heart pounded in her throat as she ran through the forest, the familiar paths blurred by tears. She found him by the river, just as he had promised, his face pale beneath the starlight. "They know," she gasped, her breath hitching in her chest. "They're coming for you." He did not speak. Instead, he took her hand and pulled her close. "Then we leave now," he said, his voice fierce with resolve. Together, they ran. Through the darkened forest and across the wild plains, they moved like shadows chased by the wind. Hours slipped by in a blur of aching limbs and whispered promises. And when the first light touched the horizon, Suinīng dared to believe they had escaped. But the world was not kind to those who defied its laws. They found them just as the sun crept above the mountains, a dozen men, their faces cold and unyielding. Rangvom moved to shield her, his body taut with the instinct to fight. But there were too many. Rough hands tore them apart, the sharp taste of iron filling the air as Rangvom's blood stained the earth. Still, he did not beg. Even as they bound his hands and dragged him back toward the village, his gaze held hers, steady, unbroken. And in that look, Suinīng knew the truth. He would never stop fighting for her. The village stood silent as they returned, the weight of judgment pressing against the sky. The elders did not speak of mercy. For those who defied the law, there was none. When they pulled Suinīng away from him, she did not cry out. She did not plead. She only held his gaze until the last possible moment, willing him to feel the promise she could not speak aloud. No matter what came next, she would not let them break her. And somewhere beneath the weight of fear and pain, a spark still burned, fierce and unyielding. The morning air was heavy with silence as the village gathered at the edge of the clearing. Pale light seeped through the sky, casting long shadows across the earth. Suinīng stood in the center, her wrists bound, the rough fibers biting into her skin. Her face, once soft with youth, was drawn and pale, but her dark eyes held no trace of fear. Rangvom knelt beside her, his hands tied behind his back, blood drying at the corner of his mouth. Yet even broken and bruised, there was no defeat in him. His gaze never left hers, as if the world around them had ceased to exist. The elders stood in a solemn circle, their expressions carved from stone. The oldest among them stepped forward, his voice slow and cold as winter's breath. "You have broken the sacred laws," he said, his words echoing through the stillness. "For your defiance, There is but one judgment. Suinīng did not flinch. She had known this moment would come from the first time Rangvom's hand brushed hers beneath the shadowed canopy of the forest. Still, the weight of it settled deep in her bones. There would be no mercy, no forgiveness. And yet, if given the choice again, she would not turn away from him. Rangvom's voice was rough but steady when he spoke. "I loved her," he said, lifting his head, "and I will love her beyond death." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mixture of awe and unease. Love was not meant to challenge the laws of the village. Love was a duty, a quiet thing to be given within the boundaries of blood and tradition. What Suinīng and Rangvom had done was a rebellion, a flame against the cold order of their world. And for that, they would pay the ultimate price. The punishment was not a swift death. That would have been too merciful. Instead, the earth itself would swallow them. A burial while breath still filled their lungs, the weight of the soil pressing down until life slipped away. It was the fate reserved for those who defied the will of the ancestors, a warning carved into the memory of the living. Suinīng did not struggle as they led her to the open grave. The scent of fresh earth clung to the air, rich and heavy. Her heart thundered in her chest, but she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. When the elders gestured for Rangvom to be brought beside her, her breath caught in her throat. They had torn it from her once before. This time, they would not succeed. His eyes found hers as they were forced to kneel together. The bindings cut into his wrists, but he leaned toward her as far as the ropes allowed. "Do not be afraid," he whispered, his voice fierce and low. "They could take everything from us, but not this. Not who we are." Tears burned at the edges of her vision, but she held them back. She would not let them see her weep. Instead, she tilted her face toward his, her lips brushing his ear. "We will not be apart," she said, her words a promise carved deeper than flesh. The first shovelful of earth struck the ground beside them. The sound was dull and final. Each handful of soil was a mark against their love, a declaration that the villages would outlast their defiance. But the village did not understand that some loves could not be buried. As the dirt rose around their knees, Rangvom shifted against his bonds. His shoulder pressed against hers, a final point of warmth against the growing cold. "When the wind moves through the mountains," he murmured, his breath warm against her temple, "it will carry our names. They will not forget us." Suinīng closed her eyes, drawing in the memory of his voice, the weight of his presence beside her. They had stolen away their freedom, but the village could not touch what lay between their hearts. As the soil reached their waists, the world seemed to blur at the edges, time stretching and folding, caught in the stillness of the grave they shared. A hush fell over the crowd as the last of the earth was packed down, leaving nothing but a mound beneath the sky. The elders turned away first, their duty done. One by one, the villagers followed, their footsteps fading into the distance until only the wind remained, a soft, restless whisper weaving through the trees. But the earth did not hold silence for long. By nightfall, the winds shifted, cold and sudden, stirring the leaves like restless spirits. Some said they heard voices on the breeze, soft, intertwined murmurs calling to one another beneath the moon. In the weeks that followed, no grass grew on the grave where Suinīng and Rangvom had been laid. Only wildflowers blossomed there, bright, untamed blooms that no hand could root out. The elders did not speak of what had been done, but the village did not forget. Mothers warned their daughters against the folly of forbidden love, while young men glanced toward the mountains and wondered whether freedom was worth the price. But beneath the quiet warnings and the fear that lingered, the story of Suinīng and Rangvom spread beyond the borders of the village. It traveled with the traders who crossed the valleys, whispered at night beneath the stars. They became more than lovers. They became a legend, a reminder that even in the face of unyielding laws, love could burn brighter than fear. And on certain nights, when the wind moves through the valley, the villagers say you can still hear their voices, soft, steady, and unbroken, calling to each other through the dark.